Hello and welcome to another episode of B-Movie Enema, the series. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, your friendly neighborhood B-movie proctologist. This week, I've got a treat for you. And with me, as always, is my trusty partner, Nurse Disembodied. Nurse, how goes it?
Doing great, Jeff. We do have a treat for this week's movie. One could call it super.
Indeed we do. Now, I'm sure I'm going to launch off into a giant tangent real soon, but before I do that, Nurse, give them the goods on this week's movie.
My pleasure. This week we have 1980's The Pumaman, directed by Alberto De Martino. It stars Walter George Alton, Donald Pleasance, Miguel Angel Fuentes, and Sidney Rome. This action-packed, comic book-style superhero movie finds mild-mannered Professor Tony Farms gain ancient alien powers to become a man-god named the Pumaman. He battles against an evil organization led by Cobras, who plans to use the man-god's special mind-controlling mask to control people to, make him powerful or something. But anyway, yeah, the Pumaman.
Great work as always, Nurse. So, yeah, let me get into a tangent here. Cool? Cool. Alright, I'm a giant comic book nerd. Well, I'm a giant nerd, therefore I think comic books and Star Trek and all that shit kind of comes along with that territory. I have enough knowledge in this field to feel as though I can appropriately speak to what I call the 4 ages of comic book superheroes in film. And what's kind of interesting is that there are 4 ages of comic books when it comes to the style of writing, the publishing techniques, and more. So let's start there. The comic book ages goes as follows. The golden age of comic books start back in the mid to late 30s and hit the mega big time with the creation of Superman in 1938. From there, we had all sorts of heroes that followed in his wake. There were lots of different kinds of comics too, from action and superhero books to crime and horror and even westerns. The next age of comics came in the 50s with the Silver Age, and this is generally considered to have started around 1956 after a book called Seduction of the Innocent basically wrecked the comic book industry. In the Silver Age, DC Comics began reinventing their most classic heroes like The Flash and Green Lantern, and revamped other heroes like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. This also ultimately led to Marvel Comics coming along and reinvigorating the industry in the 60s. The Bronze Age of comics started in 1970 and saw a massive expansion of publishing, particularly at DC and Marvel Comics, as these two titans duked it out for readership share. It also saw a gradual loosening of the self-censorship Comics Code authority and allowed for the return of slightly darker storytelling and horror elements in comics. In 1985, the current age, the modern age, began, and we talk about the return of darker storytelling. Well, it doesn't get much darker than the modern age. Watchmen, The Dark Knight Returns, indie comics publishers who would focus on anti-heroes and sell their books to a ton of disaffected teens. It's interesting that it's hard to define when we might move into something like the postmodern age of comic books because, well, we are still kind of currently in the current age. What we can say is that we feel pretty confident when the start and end of at least the Golden Age and the Silver Age were. We can also feel pretty confident that there was a Platinum Age of comic books that predated the Golden Age, and that was mostly made up of collected newspaper funnies and such. Now, the Platinum Age ran for about 40 years, so maybe we'll know more about when the next age of comics will come in the next few years as the Modern Age hits a 40-year mark. But then again, no one really knows when the modern age truly began. Some say it was with the mega hit crossover event Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985. There are even considerations that the modern age didn't actually begin until 2004 when DC's sequel to Crisis, Infinite Crisis, was being built up to, and Marvel's premier superhero team, the Avengers, went through a shift. The time between 1985 and 2004 would then be called the Dark Age of comics, because of the grim and gritty content that took focus during those years. But anyway, let's talk about movies in the superhero genre in particular. To me, we are currently living in the golden age of superhero movies, and that's because Warner Brothers and Disney have put a ton of stock on their DC and Marvel properties. Marvel movies are tentpoles and event movies. They often lead box office figures every year. I don't think I need to go too much into that, but I put the beginning of this current golden age of superhero movies at Iron Man in 2008. Now, if we go all the way back to the beginning of superheroes on the big screen, we see a lot of serials, and these really began even before the golden age of comics with characters like Dick Tracy, Flash Gordon, and Buck Rogers. Then, as the 40s dawned, Superman, Batman, and Captain America were too hot to avoid using in serials. And serials were the things that would usually play before a movie, and you had to keep coming back every Saturday to see the next chapter of that story. So the original form of the comic book movie was done with costumed mystery men in serials, but that did lead to characters like Superman and Batman getting their own very popular kids' TV shows. And once Marvel had claimed their stake, they also got cartoon series on TV too. The Batman series of the 60s led to the TV appearances of Green Hornet, Isis, and Captain Marvel, the Shazam one, not the Marvel one. And in the end of that era, we saw slightly more mature viewership on television with Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk. And that led to a couple of TV movies for Captain America and a short-lived Spider-Man live-action series. However, the new era dawned with 1978's Superman. Superman was a very well-made actual film done by actual filmmakers and people who wanted to make art. Naturally, this led to all sorts of knockoffs and attempts from Condor Man to the return of Captain Invincible to the Italian knockoffs like the Pumaman and Supersonic Man. Hey, by the way, nurse.
What you got?
Any luck on securing that American dub of Supersonic Man?
Well, I've been kind of busy. We had your rival show up. We had that guy here to look at the poop shoot. Clumpy was here. I was possessed by a horny demon. Or maybe I still am possessed by that demon? I don't know. It's been pretty busy. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough. But anyway, as the Superman movies continued and declined in quality, along came that next era that stuck around a little longer, and that was ushered in by 1989's Batman by Tim Burton. After Batman was a huge hit, Dick Tracy got a movie, then Darkman, The Shadow, The Phantom, a trio of Batman sequels, and Steel. And it was 1998's Blade that brought Marvel into the game, and they ended up having big hits with X-Men movies and Spider-Man movies. Marvel had a little bit of a problem though. Their properties were licensed out to several different studios, and they were doing a good job of pumping out movies with a Hulk film, Daredevil, Elektra, a pair of Fantastic Four movies, and a couple of Punisher films. But they were kind of shoddy in quality, and Marvel didn't quite have the control that they would get later on when we enter this current golden age. But anyway, that was my tangent. I would love to have gone a little deeper, but that's the way it goes, right? Still, not too bad.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad at all. Kind of fun.
Well, we need to get started with The Pumaman. This movie is, kind of surprisingly, a full 90 minutes long. So let's dive into this flick, and we'll see you here after the first act.
Oh man, Jeff. This is some seriously exciting stuff. Did you know that this was released on Valentine's Day in 1980?
I did not.
Do you think people went on date nights together on Valentine's Day to watch The Pumaman? And if so, how many of them are still together today?
I'm gonna guess none.
I don't know, Jeff. I mean, between Pumaman's relationships with Jane and Vidinho, I choose to believe this is one of the most romantic movies we've ever shown. I bet this even ends with Pumaman kissing one of those two supporting characters.
I'll take that bet. Now, I love the scene early on when Vidinho dumps the unwitting Pumaman out a window. And then when Pumaman gets up, we see Vidinho just booking it around the corner of the building to chase after him at top speed. It made me laugh so hard.
I'm not gonna lie, I love how quick this movie starts. No fat wasted on this movie's story. Jane tells us everything the opening text says, then Cobras immediately figures out that this mask he had to have Jane give a translation for would allow him to control her. Then does. Then Vidinho tosses Tony out the window and just tells him he's Pumaman. Easy peasy.
Absolutely. Now, this is not the type of movie that has any kind of time to waste. Still, let's talk about some of the people in this movie. We kick things off with Pumaman himself, Walter George Alton. Now, Alton only appeared in 4 films. His most recognizable movie and biggest film was probably Blake Edwards' classic 10, starring Dudley Moore and Bo Derek. He followed that bit part up with a lead role in this. And then 4 years later, he shows up in one of the all-time greatest movies ever covered on the B-Movie Enema blog, the one, the only, Heavenly Bodies. He plays the sort of villain Jack, who, up until he does something really shitty in that, he's just kind of sort of a bad guy, but after that, nada. After acting, he became a practicing attorney of malpractice cases, and I really need to try to avoid him. Better hide that Grey's Anatomy coloring book. But Vidinho is played by Miguel Angel Fuentes, and Fuentes is a Mexican actor who's had a lot of work over a 50-year career. He got his start in a Santo film, and Santo was a beloved masked wrestler in Mexico known as a luchador, but he continued to work for years after the Pumaman. He does mostly TV lately, but in films including Hollywood films like The Mexican and Blow, he mostly gets hired to be a tough guy or a bodyguard. Thirdly, we have our lovely leading lady of the film, Sydney Rome. Now, Rome grew up in a rich Akron, Ohio family, but would eventually make her way to Europe, where she started appearing in a lot of Italian films as well as German films. And she usually simply played what she could very easily be visualized as, a pretty American abroad. After this movie, the beautiful Rome would become one of the 80s aerobics icons, starring in a few of her own workout videos. Her first film, Some Girls Do, well, I suspect we'll be learning a lot more about that one in just a couple of episodes from here. And finally, we have Donald Pleasence.
Seems like that guy has been in almost everything.
Well, you ain't kidding on that. His career started in TV and film in the early 50s, and he's mostly known for the films that he would appear in, most notably as Dr. Loomis in 5 Halloween films. And he worked quite often with John Carpenter, having also appeared in Escape from New York as the president who has been held captive in the prison city of New York City, as well as in The Prince of Darkness, a very creepy movie and maybe one of the most haunting films made by Carpenter. He also appeared as the first time you'd see the main villain of James Bond on screen as Blofeld in You Only Live Twice. He also appeared in The Great Escape and THX 1138, the first film by George Lucas. But my favorite little role of his, as B.D. Hoffler in Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Talk about a bonkers flick. But yeah, he appeared in an episode of The Twilight Zone in the early 60s, then followed that up with an episode of The Outer Limits just 1 year later. Pleasence was a guy who would show up for just about any movie if your check cashed, but I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. He's not goofing around in this movie. He's playing Cobras fairly straight, and he's a good bad guy. You could even see how well that would play to his benefit with subsequent Halloween films, as Sam Loomis gets a little crazier with each film that he's chasing Michael Myers. And by the way, did you know that Sam Loomis was the name of the character played by John Gavin in Psycho?
I didn't know that. Was the Halloween character named for the one in Psycho?
As far as I can tell, probably yes. Psycho has been often referenced in the decades that followed it, and it's hard to not imagine Donald Pleasence as anything other than his Dr. Loomis role, even though Jamie Lee Curtis would be the face of the Halloween franchise at the beginning. Honestly, those first 5 Michael Myers films really belong to Pleasence and his Loomis character. There was something kind of heroic about him in those first 2 films. He genuinely seemed to be worried about Michael Myers running loose, and by Halloween 4 and 5 in particular, he's a total nutcase, and it's kind of great. But a couple of years later, after the Pumaman, Pleasence would go on to play Prosser, a leader in a dystopian Orwellian future in a movie called Warrior of the Lost World. It's another Italian ripoff, this time of The Road Warrior and Mad Max, but honestly, he's kind of playing the same type of character as Cobras. He's just basically the head of a group of goons and bad guys, and if you don't want to play for his side, he'll just brainwash you and plug you into a computer like some sort of a drone. Maybe that's another movie that we should cover on the show someday. In 1994, not long before Pleasance passed away from heart failure due to complications from a heart valve replacement surgery, Queen Elizabeth II awarded him with the status of Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire for his services to the acting profession. And frankly, he may have been in a lot of these kind of goofy Italian flicks, but he was always a great actor and incredibly watchable. It was almost like he brought a little more status to these movies by just being in the film. All right, so let's get back to the movie and let's get to the truth of the Pumaman's powers and how this goofball paleontologist will likely screw it up. Nurse, you gotta love a superhero who wears a black long sleeve shirt, tan corduroys, and a silk magician's costume cape. Nurse?
Huh.
What are you doing over there?
Check it out. This mask that almost looks like it was made from cardboard and gold aluminum foil appeared during that segment of the movie.
Huh. Well, that looks like the same type of mask Cobra's has, but like the disc you got during Alien Private Eye, I wager to guess it's a fart mask.
Well, I was running some tests on it, like with that disc from the poop chute during Alien Private Eye, and it turns out that it was a fart Hey, you already figured it out?
Yeah, I mean, it only makes sense. One, we already had a fart-producing artifact from another planet earlier this season, plus, I write these scripts. I'd be nowhere without fart gags.
Good point.
Anyway, so Cobras is up to no good, and that really should not be a surprise. The guy's name is Cobras. He has all these top brass leader-type guys show up at his mansion to talk about, I don't know, something, but it's a trap to get them all into the same room so that he can use his mask on them and set it up so that he can, like, I don't know, rule the world whenever he decides to. I don't know. I guess pull that trigger?
How did you like that trendy aviator's cap Jane was wearing while she was driving around town?
Oh man, it seems as though there's something stupid and dumb that happens in every segment of this movie. First you got Vidinho running at full speed to get Tony after he dumped his ass out the window. Now you got Sidney Rome wearing a leather aviator's cap while driving.
Can we address a couple other things that make me giggle?
Absolutely, what you got?
We should probably talk about how Donald Pleasance says Pumaman. He says it like Pumaman.
Yeah, that is kind of wild. At least he's consistent.
Is that his accent, or do you think he's just having a laugh at the whole thing and being a goofball?
Honestly, it could go either way.
Yeah, beats me.
And what else?
Pumaman flies like an idiot.
Oh my god, yes.
I mean, look at the Superman movies. He looks nice and even, comfortable, and his body looks sleek and aerodynamic because he's flat. Now look at Pumaman. He looks like he's on someone's feet, like he's playing airplane with somebody. He looks like a baby.
And he just looks like he's afraid of falling, which is not terrible because he's kind of a reluctant hero.
But most people will be too busy laughing at him trying to balance himself in the contraption he's in to remember that.
Yeah, and that's a direct reaction to the Superman the movie. So in the old Superman serials and TV series, Superman was, I believe, mostly filmed with him lying on a machine that looked like part of his costume. In the Superman movie, it was an elaborate system of wires, and the wire work looked great. And what's more, Christopher Reeve looked maybe even more comfortable than George Reeves did in the old TV show. Now, it was more than just the wires that made Christopher Reeve fly, as there was also a whole system with like a seesaw-like device to propel him into flying with a bar that lifted him off the ground completely. It really made his flying look real. But this, well, obviously this production had a single wire, and it was also probably tied around Walter George Alton's balls. That's how uncomfortable he looks.
What would you do if you found out you had superpowers?
You know, I'm not really sure. I'd probably be a good guy, maybe punch out bank robbers or some shit like that. What about you?
Totally taking over the world.
Yeah?
Oh yeah.
You didn't even think about that.
Not for a second.
So I assume that if you had a mind-controlling Aztec mask, you'd probably make people do some bad things?
I don't know. Maybe I'd just make them do stupid things. You know, like do the chicken dance or something while at the grocery store, or maybe do the mashed potato, or have them walk up to random people and say really goofy things. I'm not that evil.
That actually sounds like a premise for your own true TV prank show.
And that would be step number 1 to how I would take over the world.
Actually, that's not that bad of a plan.
See? Get on with the winning team, Jeff.
I could probably be your henchman. Are you hiring?
Yes. $12 an hour and kind of crappy benefits.
Only $12. I was hoping for $15 an hour. I'll take the crappy benefits, though.
You MSNBC watching liberals will ruin business. How can I benefit from all the monies if I have to pay you $15 an hour?
Since you put it that way.
So you'll take the job of being a henchman?
I'll think about it first. I want you to hit me with that fart mask.
I thought you'd never ask. Your buttocks belongs to me. You will fart for me. Fart!
That was pretty fun.
Oh, I could do this for hours. Now give me a big old butt flapper. Feel that ecstasy of passing gas.
Oh, that one actually felt pretty good. We should probably get back to the conclusion of the Pumaman.
Check it out. I'm going to shoot the power of the mask off the wall over there, then have it bounce off the wall behind you, and it'll hit your butt. Your butt obeys me. Give me that voodoo that your butt do-do.
Oof, well, we may have gone too far that time.
Oh my, yeah, I think I got a little carried away there.
Hey, we're back. So that was the thrilling conclusion of the Pumaman.
The Pumaman, the Pumaman, the pee-pee-poo-poo man.
Maybe put that mask back in the poop chute?
I'll think about it.
Well, that is worrisome. My underwear drawer is screaming out in pain at the thought of her keeping that mask. But I do have to question the point of the Pumaman mask. I mean, what kind of situation do you have a magical, God-given mask that can control minds? That's a big concern right there. But still, how does this work? You have a mask that can literally control people's minds, so if it falls into the wrong hands, then it can do really bad things. Isn't it kind of bad for the mask to be in the right hands also?
It also kind of goes against the whole thing that Vidinho was saying about how the gods couldn't come down and do anything about Cobras or the mask, because once the gods come down, it would signify that men wouldn't have free will. But
the mask takes away free will.
That's pretty confusing.
Yeah, the gods work in mysterious ways. Also, one of Pumaman's powers is to literally kill himself by going to sleep. That might be the most worthless power I've ever heard of. Now, there's an X-Man in the Marvel Universe called Cypher. Now, his powers, he can understand every language. Now, you might think that that wouldn't work too well in a fight with, say, Apocalypse, right? But it's actually a super great power. So, no, you don't send Cypher into a fight, but you do keep him around to read codes and languages and shit. So the Pumaman gets sent into battle, pretends he's dead, and then loses all of his powers. Oh yeah, losing all of his powers. Cobras took away all of Pumaman's powers with the mask, the one that he left behind, right? That sleeping suicide power. Pumaman kind of sucks.
He had to get out of the way for the real hero, Vidinho.
'Tis true. I mean, Vidinho puts on a belt of dynamite and plans to blow everything to shit.
He even resists the power of the mask.
Yeah, I dig it. He blows up Cobras' little heads and it frees everyone from his control.
Except for his goon squad that tries beating up Pumaman and Vidinho.
Well, yeah, I mean, those guys are on the payroll. I mean, they still got to do what they were hired for. They probably aren't being controlled.
Speaking of, you gonna take that hench position?
I'm still thinking on it. You know what I like that Pumaman tried on Cobras?
That he tried to claw at him like he was a real housewife of Pumaman City?
Yeah, that was kind of hilarious.
Pumaman is 100% to blame for killing Cobras.
Well, I mean, it's not like he didn't have it coming. I also like that Vidinho gets pissed at Pumaman when he wants to talk about how much he's going to bang Jane while Vidinho wants to commune with those Pretty irresponsible gods who just kind of left that mask lying around for Cobras to get. I mean, but you know what? We don't need to see how Cobras obtained the sacred mind-controlling mask. There's no need to show anything important like that.
He didn't even take time to translate it for us to see what it did before he figured out how to use it.
True that. Give us your final score on 1980's The Pumaman.
Well, I pretty much loved this movie. Sure, I thought we were in trouble at first when they put text on the screen that Jane instantly repeated verbatim in the first 2 minutes of the movie, but you know what? They immediately corrected course. The dialogue at times was kind of witty. There was the one part in which Tony says, "Do I look like Pumaman to you?" and Vidinho responds, "You are the worst I've ever seen." That's brilliant, because, yeah, Tony sucks. But then, that's where people like Vidinho and Donald Pleasance playing Cobra shine. They're pretty much carrying all the weight of this movie, and that's just fine by me because they were totally all in this goofy movie. And yeah, I was too. There are so many weird and funny little things that happen. The voodoo robot doll heads that Cobras was collecting as he controlled people. Did their placement mean anything? Did it matter where their heads appeared once Cobras took over their minds? I don't know, and I don't care. I like when the bug was crawling over Pumaman's face when he was playing possum, and actually, is that okay to say now? Well, I better play it safe. When he was playing dead, I hope there were outtakes of him smacking himself in the face to try and get that bug off. And I have to wonder if that just happened because he was laying on the dirty ground next to a hollowed out, abandoned warehouse. I'm pretty sure Pumaman's theme song is stuck in my head, and I don't know how I feel about that. For the Pumaman, the quintessential Valentine's Day movie that totally resulted in millions of little Puma men and Puma women to be born after romantic dinners and movies, I reward this the highest honor, a full 5 poops out of 5.
Wow, a 5 pooper, huh?
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose it has been a long time coming. I mean, we haven't had a 5 pooper since the season premiere of The Big Dollhouse.
I don't hand out 5 poopers like candy. A movie's gotta earn it. And the Pumaman earned it. Also, I was right about the movie ending with Tony kissing someone. He and Jane are hovering in the air, and I think they're even planning on banging right there while flying.
Hey, I mean, you sure did get that right. But you know what? Maybe this is meant to show us the way. Sure, the Pumaman wasn't so great of a movie. A 5 pooper, sure, but we have a sliding scale around here, and I think I just made up a wet poop joke, but I don't know. I do know that maybe we should take Vidinho's advice and trek to the Andes Mountains and look him up. Maybe he can tell us where that fart mask really belongs. So let's take the next few weeks off and make our way up the Andes, and if we so happen to make a couple of little Puma men along the way, so be it. We'll just leave them with Vidinho and get back here in time for the next feature in August. How's that sound?
I command your butt to poop!
Oh God.